Hello, we have a second line day. We are exploring the lines of gate 36, the gate of crisis, the gate that's called the darkening of the light. And the second line is called support. We know that the second line has zero capacity to recognize what other people see in it. And what other people see here in the 36 too is its inexperience. This is one of those places where education is really, really important because that place of inexperience is being seen. And this second line needs some discernment around recognizing whether the people calling them out are the right people. We have a lifetime learning here. It says assistance to others in times of decline. And they really can be of assistance. This is not to be misunderstood. They are of enormous value, but they can cause absolute havoc. They just project out that quality exactly at the moment where you really do need it. They can generate an incredible crisis in that moment. And they're very good at bringing out crisis in other people, which can be quite healing. And the other thing, of course, Ra said that the second line really has no business going out on its own anywhere ever. It should eat its own room in its own food and wait. No, it should eat its own food in its own room. And it has to be called out. This is what we know about second lines. The 36-2 has to be called to crisis. Now, it has to be called out to an experience. In the exaltation, we have the application of imagination to schemes which benefit others, feelings that can benefit others in times of crisis, can benefit others, might benefit others. The collective process is never personal. The solution over in the 48, no matter how personally the 48 takes it, that solution is still only of value to the collective when it's of value to the collective, if you know what I mean. It's it has to be of value to be of value, and it's not personal. And here in the mirror in the 36, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing what goes on here. It's just the collective insisting on sharing the experience. Come jump off this cliff with me. Let's see what happens when we land. Yeah, they don't have any other way. This is the mechanic. So benefit in times of crisis. If it's not a time of crisis, they can be a pain in the neck. In times of crisis, they're perfect. They'll pull it out of you. You'll go through that experience, you'll get it, and then you will know that you needed that experience. They know that you need that experience. No? And actually, even if you don't, the second line can see it in you and pull it out. And this is a thing to understand here in this gate, in this second line. It's the beginning of the power they have to recognize the correct moment to bring that force into somebody's life. And at that moment, then they also get their experience. So they're great in initiating that crisis so that they can have their experience. Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, I knew they needed that. It's not personal. It can feel personal, but actually it can be deeply beneficial. And it is really, it's not personal. This is the nature of crisis. The whole abstract process is about beginnings and middles and ends, and crisis is just part of the journey. When you're looking at the 36th gate, one of the things to understand is that who brings it in is subject to its crisis. And it's one of the main themes of its process. The 48 wants to get everybody to experiment with it, to find its solution and play around with it. And the 36 would like to get as many people as possible to share its experience. In the detriment, we have the more practical and individual assistance, but only when unavoidable and not as a general principle. Selective assistance in times of crisis. So they don't always do it. They don't always get you at that moment. Sometimes it can be very cruel, and that can bring its own kind of crisis. Crisis is necessary for us to develop our experience. And it is possible for us to change our perspective, to stop seeing crisis as something that is bad, and instead seeing it as something exciting. It's all about making life exciting, and we need that. And they need that kind of excitement. Anyone with that 36 in any of the lines need that kind of excitement. You have to have it. It becomes a driving force and they get restless and bored if they don't have it. For the 36, crisis is great. And they can crank it up to a really high level and everyone else is blowing fuses all around them and they're like fine afterwards. They can tell others, hey, you really needed that. If I hadn't told you, somebody else would have done. You needed to hear that. Second line doesn't really want to be disturbed. It's not really likely to get involved in an experience unless it's called out, and it's more likely to be called out in the exalted. Everything about the 36 is about dealing with the weight of the body, the demands of the body, the demand for hunger, and the demand for sex, and the demand for an experience, and the demand that it is all catalogued, and that somehow it gets to the end of the process, it's reflected upon, it's brought change and progress, and then it can be shared with the collective. So the grounding, of course, the gate 6 in the second line is called the gorilla. The emotional system that we're working with here for both the 6 and 36. This is where we get the words like guilt and blame and shame. These are really emotional words. Second line actually doesn't really know too much of that. It has to be introduced to it because it's lower trigram. There's a shyness in all second lines. They're the hermit. And so through genetic continuity, we find in the 59-2 at the other end of the channel, shyness. And then in the 54-2, we find the line of discernment. The lower trigram in social channels, it doesn't always function so well. The other is always a surprise. You get caught off guard, you're humming along in your own motor, and then all of a sudden someone is knocking on your window and calling you out. You're like, whoa, didn't see you there. Who the hell are you? Get out of my window. The moon has been in gate 64 since 0605, the collective head center gate of confusion. And next it moves into 47 at 1709. And this can be a very comforting and timely transition because the 47 is the harmonic to the 64. And so there is an opportunity here for the confusion to be made sense of. It's like in the 64, you've got that jigsaw puzzle box with the picture ripped off the lid and just a pile of, and then in the 47, someone hands you the picture back and it gives you that chance to make sense of it all. And yet there still can be some potential for depression here because the process of making sense of things happens when it happens. It's got that relationship to the wave. There's that time, there's no truth in the now. So you don't get it right now. This isn't individuality, which works much more right now in the present. It's not an instantaneous thing. And the cycle has to go through to its completion. And then finally, we have gate 6 at 0417, and this is our current Earth gate, of course, and the South Node is here too. So there's a lot going on in gate 6 at the moment, the gate of conflict and friction. Or maybe there's nothing going on there for you. It depends. How are you experiencing gate 6? How are you experiencing gate 36? Because there's a lot going on there as well. So it's one of those really interesting times for some of these planets where it's all stacking up. So are you having a particular experience with the 36 and with the 6? And if you are, would you like to share it? I would be very interested as we come to the end of this journey to read some last reflections that you have. Yes, okay, so that's us for today. That is the second line. I'll be back tomorrow with a third line day. Third line in a time of crisis. What could possibly go wrong? I will see you tomorrow. Until then, go gently.